If you like storytime vibes, hit subscribe and let's dive in together.
That night started like any other Friday, until my wife looked up from her phone and said, "Honey, my office is hosting a party this weekend. Daniel said I should bring you." Her tone was casual, but her eyes flickered. Just for a second, a flicker I almost missed. Daniel, her boss. The name alone tightened something inside me. I'd heard it before, in passing. The way she'd say, "Daniel wants this campaign done by Monday." Or, "Daniel thought my presentation was great." Harmless work talk. Until you start listening between the lines. Still, I smiled. "Sure, I'll go. I've always wanted to meet the man who praises you so much." She hesitated, then smiled back. But it didn't reach her eyes. I should have known then. The night of the party, we drove downtown to a hotel with glass walls that glittered like a cage of diamonds. From the outside, everything screamed success. Champagne, city lights, and music too smooth to be real. Inside, everyone wore ambition like perfume. And Daniel, he was the kind of man who believed the world owed him attention. When he spotted Olivia across the room, I saw it. That hungry look, the kind of gaze a man doesn't use for work. He walked over, confident, rehearsed, fake charm dripping from every smile. "Olivia, you look stunning," he said, letting his eyes drag over her in a way that made my skin crawl. I stepped forward, extended my hand. "I'm her husband." He shook it loosely, more of a formality than respect, and smirked. "Of course you are." The room buzzed with laughter and conversation, but in my head, a quiet storm began to form. Every touch, every glance, every excuse he found to pull her aside, I saw it all. I cataloged every move, every word, every look, because that's what you do when you sense danger near the person you love. I didn't know exactly what was coming that night, but I knew one thing. Daniel wasn't just hosting a party. He was testing a boundary, and he had no idea how far I'd go to make sure he never crossed it. Daniel was the kind of man who filled a room even when he wasn't speaking, not because people liked him, but because everyone knew what he could take away. Promotions, projects, opportunities. Fear has its own gravity. He floated around the room with his glass of whiskey like a king checking on his subjects, and every few minutes, his eyes drifted back to Olivia. Always her. I stood near the bar, pretending to sip champagne, watching him the way a soldier studies an enemy before a fight. I noticed everything. The way he'd touch her arm a little too long when he laughed. The way she'd step back half a foot each time. Subtle, but desperate. At one point, he leaned in to whisper something, and she smiled politely, but her eyes darted toward me for a split second. A silent plea. That was enough. When he finally walked away to schmooze another group, I joined her. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She nodded, but her voice was thin. "Yeah, just work stuff." Her fingers fidgeted with her wine glass. I recognized that gesture, the one she used when she was anxious, but trying to hide it. "I don't like the way he talks to you," I said. "It's just Daniel," she replied, forcing a laugh. "He's intense." "Intense?" I repeated, letting the word hang there. "Or inappropriate?" She didn't answer. That silence told me everything words couldn't. I'd seen this type before. Men who thought status gave them a pass. The ones who believed they could blur boundaries and call it charisma. But I also knew that reacting too soon, too loud, could backfire, especially for her. So I decided to play the long game. Daniel called for a toast later that evening. He stood near the stage, one hand raised, the other wrapped around his glass. To teamwork, to family, to Olivia, for her incredible work this quarter. The crowd cheered, glasses lifted, and for a moment, Olivia looked proud, until Daniel placed his hand on her lower back and let it linger. Too long. She froze. I saw it. So did the woman standing behind them. Her smile faltered, eyes darting toward me. I took a step forward, forcing Daniel's gaze to meet mine. He smiled again, but this time the charm cracked. For a split second, I saw what lived underneath it: entitlement. And that was the moment I made a quiet promise to myself. He could have his toast. He could have his spotlight, but tonight, he'd also get something he never expected: consequences. By the time the clock struck 9, the air in that ballroom felt heavier, as if everyone was inhaling the same tension but pretending it wasn't there. Laughter still filled the room, but it had turned hollow, practiced. Daniel was drunk on power, not alcohol. I could see it in the looseness of his grin, the way he hovered too close, always claiming it was just business. He kept orbiting Olivia like a predator pretending to be polite. Every few minutes, he'd find a reason to stand next to her again. A compliment here, a whisper there. She smiled through it, because that's what professionalism demands. But her shoulders were tight. Her eyes never relaxed. When I caught her glancing toward me again, it wasn't embarrassment I saw this time. It was exhaustion. A silent plea that said, "Please, not again." Then came the photographer. "Everyone, group photo for the company site." People shuffled toward the center of the room. Daniel, of course, positioned himself right next to her. A move so deliberate, it almost looked choreographed. I followed the crowd, standing just a few feet behind. The photographer adjusted the lighting. Everyone smiled. And then, it happened. Daniel's hand slid lower down her back. At first, it looked innocent, a guiding touch, but then it didn't stop. It lingered, moving down toward her hip. Olivia's face tightened. She shifted slightly, trying to step away, but he followed. Something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just walked forward, calm and steady, until I was standing right behind them. Then I placed my hand between them and said, low enough for him to hear, "Move it." He blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" He sneered, still trying to sound in control. I leaned in closer, eyes locked on his. "Touch her again," I said quietly, "and find out what happens." The room fell silent. Cameras froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the background music seemed to hold its breath. Daniel smirked, trying to recover his composure. "Relax, man. It's just a friendly, I cut in, voice sharp but controlled. "Is a handshake. What you're doing is harassment." Every syllable landed like a hammer. Whispers spread around us like wildfire. Olivia stepped back, standing half behind me now. Safe. Shielded. Daniel's mask cracked. "You'd better watch yourself," he hissed. I met his glare with a calm I didn't even know I still had. "I don't need to watch myself," I said. "You need to watch your career." That was the moment his confidence died. He stepped back, muttering something under his breath, but everyone had already seen enough. He thought he could play games in the dark, but I had just flipped on the lights. Daniel stood frozen, his smirk cracking under the weight of the silence. Around us, colleagues exchanged glances, some shocked, some unsurprised. The truth is, everyone already knew who he was. They'd just been too afraid to name it. I let that silence stretch, because silence is power when the other person expects noise. Then I said, low but clear enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Funny thing, Daniel, you keep calling this friendly, but you and I both know this has been going on for months, don't we?" His eyes darted, first at me, then at Olivia, then at the crowd. "What are you talking about?" he said too quickly. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed, displaying a message thread. His words, his late-night texts, his accidental compliments. "I'm talking about this," I said. "The messages, the ones you sent after midnight, the ones that weren't about marketing plans or client calls." The color drained from his face. "You went through her phone?" he snapped, desperate. I shook my head. "No, she showed me, because she thought she was overreacting. Because you made her question her own boundaries." The whispers grew louder now. A few people stepped back. Someone muttered, "I knew it." Daniel tried to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous." "Save it," I said, cutting through his words. "Because if you try anything again, this doesn't just go to HR, it goes to corporate. And your wife. The mention of his wife hit him like a bullet. His jaw locked. Yeah, I knew. Men like him always think their sins are invisible, that their ring is just an accessory, not a promise. You wouldn't dare, he whispered. I leaned closer. You really think I came here unprepared? I tilted my phone slightly so he could see the screen. A small folder labeled evidence. His messages, his voicemails, even the ones he deleted. That's when he realized the trap had been there all along. Olivia gasped softly behind me. She hadn't known. I'd kept it from her, not because I didn't trust her, but because I wanted her safety to come before her guilt. For the first time that night, Daniel stepped back. No more arrogance, no more smirks. Just a hollow man staring at the ruin of his own making. You should leave, I said quietly, before you embarrass yourself any further. He didn't argue. He just turned, stiff, defeated, and walked away toward the bar. The room exhaled all at once, the way people do when they've been holding their breath for too long. That was the reckoning. Not the shouting, not the threats, just truth. Calm, brutal, undeniable truth. When we stepped out of the hotel, the night air hit us like cold water. Sharp, clean, real. For the first time in hours, I could breathe. Olivia walked beside me in silence, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She kept her head down, as if afraid that meeting my eyes might break whatever fragile calm still existed between us. We reached the car. She slid into the passenger seat and stared out the window. The city lights spilled across her face, gold and trembling, but her expression stayed unreadable. I started the engine, but didn't drive. For a while, we just sat there, the muffled hum of traffic filling the space between us. Then she whispered, almost too soft to hear, I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle it. Her voice cracked on the last word. I turned to her. Hey, I said quietly. Protecting you doesn't mean I think you're weak. Tears slipped down her cheeks, catching the glow from the street lamps. She pressed her hands to her face, shaking her head. I thought, if I ignored him long enough, he'd stop. I didn't want to cause drama. I didn't want to risk my job. I reached over and took her hand. You shouldn't have to fight that kind of war alone, I said. Not in silence. Not while pretending everything's fine. She looked at me then, really looked. And what I saw wasn't guilt or shame. It was relief. That kind of relief that only comes when the fear finally ends. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? For not telling you sooner? For letting it go on this long? I squeezed her hand gently. You don't owe me an apology. He's the one who should be sorry. But he won't be, because men like him never think they're wrong until someone makes them face it. She let out a shaky laugh, half sob, half breath. You really scared him back there. I smiled faintly. Good. Maybe next time he looks at a woman like that, he'll remember tonight. We sat there a little longer, just breathing. The quiet kind of silence that comes after a storm finally passes. Then she leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice small but steady. Thank you, she said, for seeing me, for fighting for me. I kissed her forehead. Always. Outside, the city kept glowing like nothing had happened. But for us, something had. Something small. Quiet, but powerful. The kind of shift that changes the way you see love. Not as possession, not as protection, but as partnership. Standing shoulder to shoulder, even when the world crosses the line. Monday arrived colder than usual. The sky was gray, the kind that made the city feel slower, as if even the air knew something was about to change. Olivia got dressed for work in silence. Her movements were careful, deliberate. I could see the tension in her shoulders as she buttoned her blouse, checked her reflection, and exhaled slowly. Do you want me to drive you? I asked. She shook her head. No, I need to face them. On my own. I nodded. Sometimes love means stepping back, even when every instinct wants to follow. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from her. HR called me in. I waited. Minutes felt like hours. Then another message. They saw everything. He's suspended. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, letting the words settle in. Justice, quiet, methodical, overdue. When she came home that evening, her face looked different, lighter. Not happy exactly, but free. He didn't show up, she said softly. HR said they're escalating it to corporate. Apparently, shareholders got wind of it too. I smiled faintly. Good. Maybe the system works once in a while. She nodded, but her eyes shimmered. Not with sadness this time, but gratitude. They thanked me. Said others had noticed his behavior, but were too scared to speak up. That sentence hung in the air for a moment. So many people saw. So many stayed silent. Later, we sat on the couch. Lights dim. The hum of the city outside our window. She leaned against me, quiet, thoughtful. What if he tries to come back? She asked. I looked at her. Then he'll find out the hard way. Some lines don't get redrawn. We didn't talk much after that. There was no need. The storm had passed, the wreckage left behind, but something new had grown in its place. Trust. A kind of understanding that only comes from surviving something ugly together. Weeks later, Olivia told me he resigned before the board could fire him. No press release, no farewell message, just silence. The kind of silence that follows the end of an empire built on arrogance. And that night, as we walked home from dinner, she slipped her hand into mine and said, "I'm glad you were there that night." I smiled, watching the city lights shimmer across her eyes. "Always," I said. That's what love is supposed to look like. Not silence, not fear, just standing up when it matters. Because the truth is, real power isn't about control. It isn't about titles or money or status. It's about respect. And a man who abuses his power never really had any to begin with. Daniel learned that the hard way. And as for me, I didn't just protect my wife that night. I protected the part of both of us that still believed the world could be fair, if someone was willing to draw the line.